We turn now to those developments which follow the establishment of source criticism as the widely accepted explanation for the origins of the Pentateuch, especially to Hermann Gunkel and his contribution to the rise of what comes to be known as form criticism. Before we get to Gunkel, let's look at some of the things that contributed to the rise of historical criticism. Because despite the widespread consensus that source analysis had provided the key to understanding the origins of the Pentateuch, there remained, even among historical critical scholars, an underlying sense of dissatisfaction because there became, an increasing sense that the documentary hypothesis didn't answer all the questions and perhaps didn't even address the most important questions. Some of the factors that led to the emergence of these feelings were, first, the development and spread of sociological theory. The documentary hypothesis tended to work with the idea of authors, lone authors in particular. Increasingly at the beginning of the 20th century, there was a sense among scholars that it was important to explain the origins of biblical faith in terms of communities of people. This was supplemented by an increasing knowledge of the ancient world that was emerging through the efforts of archaeology. Frankly, the early historical critics knew very, very little actually about the ancient world because there was simply very few sources of information outside the Bible. So frankly, they were operating in a factual vacuum, and some of the things that were being discovered by archaeology at the beginning of the 20th century were bringing into question some of the presuppositions that the early historical critical scholars had promoted. But there was also dissatisfaction at the other end of the process because there was a widespread recognition that historical criticism had produced a perhaps significant academic theory, but one which seemed to be dry and without any real spiritual meaning or life that could communicate anything to believers who were not academic specialists in Old Testament studies. And frankly, there was also another influential matter, that is that the documentary hypothesis really did not treat the Bible like it was any other book. There was an increasing awareness that this is just not the way books are written in the modern world and also in the ancient world. And finally, the last, in some ways most important of the things that led to reconsideration of some of these matters was what comes to be known as Ulrich's epic laws. These so-called epic laws were developed by the Danish scholar Axel Ulrich. Now, Ulrich was not a biblical scholar and did not teach the Bible or spend much time actually doing anything at all with Old Testament faith and religion. He was concerned with the study and the transmission of Nordic mythology and the folklore tales that it generated. And in 1921, he publishes a book whose English title is Principle for Oral Narrative Research. It didn't get translated for 70 years. But nevertheless, because Ulrich was highly influential upon others, his book was much more influential than is widely recognized in Christianity and particularly in academic circles in the Western world, particularly here in America. So his contribution needs to be recognized because he has a direct and powerful influence upon the German scholar Hermann Gunkel. Gunkel had taught New Testament at Göttingen University and later Old Testament at a variety of other institutions across Germany, but he's best known to us today as the father of form criticism. Now, in the context of the early 20th century, Gunkel accepted the documentary hypothesis as far as it went, because he accepted the view that the documentary hypothesis explained how the documents come to be combined into the final form of the Pentateuch as we have it. It's just that for Gunkel, that wasn't very important, because following Axel Ulrich, Gunkel maintained that behind the written documents, there is a long history of oral transmission and development. And it's that oral stage of the development of the religious traditions of Israel that's the really important and creative stage. And that the texts, when they come to be written down, merely mark the tombstone or the end of the process that was carried out in the life of the community. So for Gunkel, and for those who followed him in the development of form criticism, what mattered was rediscovering the spiritual life of the community that developed and was transmitted orally, and which is finally preserved in the written permanent form of the texts that later came together to make up the Old Testament and the Pentateuch in particular. So Gunkel lays out three principles that underline his understanding. First, we've already mentioned that there is a history of pre-literary or oral development that stands behind most of Israel's text and certainly behind the Pentateuch. Secondly, that different events in the life of the community generate specific kinds of literary responses. So, for example, the death of a king would lead to a particular type of poetry that mourned the king and his passing and the sorrow of the community as it went through the experience of the king's death. So every event, all the major types of events anyway, in the life of a community eventually generates specific types of literature. And connected to that is the third principle, that there exists a consistent relationship between the experience of the community and the literary response. In other words, this relationship is fixed. A certain experience always produces the same kind of response. Now, this is important for Gunkel's theory because it leads to the conclusion that the key to rediscovering the life of the community behind the text is to identify the different genres or forms of the text, because there's a direct connection between each genre and an experience of the people. So how does Gunkel say we should go about this? Well, he presents the following methodology. First, he says we need to define and determine what the genre of a literary unit is. This stage, Gunkel gives the name Gottesforschung in German, genre research. Probably be a reasonable translation. And of this stage in the process, Gunkel writes that every genre shows its individuality in certain defined characteristics, specifically a common store of thought and moods. So there is a particular set of ideas and emotions associated with each individual genre. And this is carefully transmitted through the generations. Secondly, he says there's a specific linguistic form so that definite phrases and sentence structures and images and so forth are connected with each individual genre. So you can identify the genre in part from the ideas and the phrases, but also from the actual form of the literary response. And the third element, then, is to identify the particular sitz im leben, or life situation of the people which gave rise to that experience. because there is in the life of the community a definite connection, as we've seen, between each experience and the literary response associated with that experience. So he says there are three elements to a genre: a common store of thoughts, ideas, and moods, a fixed linguistic form, and a specific sitz, leben that's associated with it. So Gunkel writes, only when we have all three of these preserved together can we speak of a true genre. So that's what Gunkel meant by Gottesforschung, the need to determine the literary genre of a particular unit. The second stage, Gunkel says, is to identify the experience of the life of the community, the Sitzleben, that gave rise to the text. And this he calls Formsgeschichte, the history of the genre or the history of the form. That is, not just the study of the form as a piece of literature, but the history behind the form. Of this, Gunkel says, every ancient literary type originally belonged to a quite definite side of the national life of Israel. To understand the literary type, we must in each case have the whole situation clearly before us. And so ask ourselves, who's speaking? Who are the listeners? What's the situation? What effect is aimed at? So that's all part of the stage of getting behind the literature to the experience of the people that's reflected in it. Thirdly, Gunkel says, is the stage of reconstructing the whole spiritual life of the people through their literary remains. So if the first two stages are analytical, the third stage is synthetic. It aims to bring together all the different genres, the ideas and experiences of the community, and sort of reconstruct the spiritual life of the community on the basis of its literary remains. And Gunkel calls this Literaturgeschichte, the literary history, if you will. So while Gunkel held that it was possible to trace the development of the intellectual and spiritual history of the Hebrews, so he did believe that it was possible to reconstruct something behind the text. He didn't think it was possible to recover actual history. So, in other words, he wasn't claiming that the Bible was historical in the sense that it told the truth about events, but rather it reflected the true inner history of the community. And Gunkel went on to say that there are two big factors that militate against the idea that the Bible could contain actual history. First, he says, is the purpose of the legends. That is the purpose of the material that's preserved. Because the purpose, he says, is not to inform people about history, but rather to teach and inspire and motivate them. Now, he says this despite the claims of the text itself that the text is intending to inform future generations about what God has done in history. Nevertheless, that's Gunkel's view. The second claim that he makes is that the reworking of the legends through the process of oral transmission to the point where they reach a written literary form and come to be preserved in the canonical text makes it impossible to recover whatever historical kernel there might have been associated with those legends. So, he said the process precludes our getting back to actual history. So even though we can construct the literary history and the spiritual life of the people, we can't recover actual history. Well, there was only one problem with Gunkel's theory, and that is that it didn't work. And even Gunkel came to recognize that it didn't work in the form in which he originally envisioned it. And the reason that it didn't work is because any attempt to trace the development of the literary traditions over time simply failed to account for the actual form in which we encounter the text in the Bible. In other words, to put it in Gunkel's terms, the problem is, he said, you have to have a store of common thoughts and ideas in a consistent form with a determinable sitz, leben, and the problem is you just don't have that very often. That while there are ideas, they're not consistently expressed, and sometimes you get ideas from different kinds of things mixed together. And so as a result, you don't get these pure forms that Gunkel envisioned, because most of the actual literary artifacts that are preserved in the Bible are mixed forms, not the kind of pure forms that Gunkel envisions. So how did Gunkel deal with this problem? Well, he explains first that over time, the pure forms tended to degenerate, and so they become mixed over time as they're handed down from generation to generation. Secondly, he says another factor is that the original forms were imitated by other communities for other purposes. Within a community, if one specific event led to a particular literary form, some other group of people could take that literary form and use it for their own purposes that would not be connected to the original experience that gave rise to it. So, given that, how did Gunkel suggest that we discover what the original forms were? Gunkel said we could get back to the original forms by recognizing that the earliest forms were short and oral and communal. And so the elements that, the more you have of these elements, brevity, oral characteristics, and the reflection of communal ideas, those are the earliest things. And as you move away from that, as things get longer, as the written form or elements of written literature become more prominent, and as the idea of the individual grows, then you're moving away from these pure forms toward later mixed forms. And so he says these mixed forms represent the transformation or degeneration of the original pure forms as the process of literary formation continues. The ultimate result of that literary formation is, of course, written documents. And so Gunkel says that this process of forming written documents is ultimately the embalming of the living oral tradition, and the literature itself is the tombstone of that living tradition. So by the time you get to written documents, the tradition has in effect died. Well, as it relates to the Psalms in particular, this led Gunkel to identify 5 major types of Psalms with some minor types that we needn't trouble ourselves with. So he sees hymns and communal laments, individual laments, royal psalms, and thanksgiving psalms as the major types. And he thinks that he can identify, he can get back behind the existing literary psalms to the original core experiences by focusing on brevity, orality, and communality in these types of psalms. So that's a look at Gunkel and how Gunkel develops the theory of form criticism.